Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, all those who have called in. My name is Athar Siddiqee. I'm the chairman of the Board of Trustees of SBA, the South Bay Islamic Association. And this evening, in partnership with Bay Muslim Media, who is also partnering with SBA, the South Bay Islamic Association, WVMA, the West Valley Muslim Association, CARE San Francisco Bay Area, ICNA, CSJ Council of Social Justice, and NCIC, Northern California Islamic Council. We're delighted to bring you tonight's fireside chat with Dr. Hatem Bazian about Islamophobia and the various events that are going on around the world. If we can have Dr. Hatem on screen, great. Dr. Hatem, welcome. Welcome, salam. So for those of you who may not be aware, Dr. Hatem is a professor of Zaytuna College. He's also a lecturer at UC Berkeley and the executive director of the Islamophobia Study Center, as well as an internationally recognized expert on Palestine, as well as Islamophobia. Dr. Hatem, you know, the world, and especially the Muslim world today, is watching with horror the genocide that is taking place in Gaza. And it's incredible that it is 2024 and this is happening. Really unfathomable, really. And it's only the two countries that are perpetrating this genocide that probably could get away with it. Wanted to get your thoughts on what is the end game? Where do you see this going? And how do you see Gaza being governed after the end of this massacre?
Well, I think what we need to first at least put forth is that Israel policies has been focused on ethnic cleansing, and Zionism itself been focused on ethnic cleansing from the earliest period, from Herzl in his book, The Jewish State, said to spirit the penniless population across the border, passing through Jabotinsky, Ben Gurion, Nakba, so on. So I think to talk about what is post-war, in essence, have to be understood that from Israel perspective, the post-war means a ethnically cleansed Gaza, with the discussions that are being had just last week, that there are discussions with the Congo, with Chad, and possible other countries to begin receiving Palestinians. Also, there is news from Jordan that there are areas in Jordan that are preparing refugee camps for the Palestinians. And then Egypt is also trying to facilitate, initially saying they'll take the medical cases, but also others. So assuming that if this continues, we're dealing with an ethnic cleansing, and then the bringing of the Palestinian Authority to govern over whatever remaining Palestinian population. Israel is talking about 200 to 300,000, which means in the current thinking process about 2 million. And I'm not, again, if we pay attention to Blinken and the US is saying we are not for transferring the population, saying this without actually making the specific policy requirements to bring an end to Israel's policies that are forcing Palestinians out. So now most of the Palestinians in Gaza have been pressed to the south, and increasingly with the current weather conditions is going to be untenable. The number of deaths are 31,000 as we speak. There are over 9,000 that are still missing under the rubble, meaning their houses have been destroyed. But the more fearful aspect is that we're dealing with the winter coming upon people, and we might witness more people dying as a result of disease, cholera, cold conditions, weather conditions, polluted water, that will possibly greater than the actual numbers that have been killed as a result of Israel genocidal bombing. So that's the question about what the end game seems to be focused as at ethnic cleansing as the outcome of what the end game from Israel's side and Israel perspective.
You know, when I talk to a lot of my friends and relatives, a lot of them lament the fact that Muslim countries are not doing enough. But it's not quite that simple, is it? In many cases, they have a gun to their head and they are kind of being told what to do. Can you shed some light on kind of the pressures that are being put on some of these Muslim countries?
Well, I do think that the Muslim world in general is a post-colonial world, meaning these states are an outcome of the colonial legacy. The elites of these countries are beholden to the colonial political order. Economically, they're still directly connected to their ex-colonial motherland and subsequently to the United States. So it would be accurate to say there is a pressure placed upon existing political elites, but it's a pressure of what you call acceptance rather than a pressure of a challenge and resistance. Meaning that if you think about any given country, its military is directly trained predominantly by the United States, Great Britain, or France. Most of its elite is educated in those three countries for the most part. And they see themselves in terms of trajectory, not resisting and challenging, because there are many that are on the take. So when we speak about US foreign aid or European foreign aid, it is literally taken to corrupt the existing political processes and elites to get the outcome that we are seeing today. And it's not surprising that it was South Africa that have actually applied and filed a case of charging Israel with genocide under the Genocide Convention. And none of the 57 Muslim majority states is the country that actually have submitted the actual lawsuit. Now, after the application, a number of countries expressed support, but support for is different than being the state that actually applied and charged Israel with genocide. We're talking about the Arab League, is almost nowhere to be seen. Organization of Islamic Uncooperation, I refuse to say Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Organization of Islamic Uncooperation also was nowhere to be seen. So literally what we are seeing is almost the complete impotence at the political level in the Arab and Muslim world, even though they do have the means and the political positionality to actually put pressure on both Israel and the United States, if not all of Europe. Just as a clear example, the predominant resource, global resource, is oil and natural gas. Yet, in this main commodity that is in the hands of the Arab and Muslim world, they refuse to apply any pressure, even if a press release of actually only saying that we will use this, I will say that Europe and the United States will play a different tune immediately if that happens. But that's not the case. And then the Arab and Muslim market is 2 billion people. And as such, that leverage is not being used in any way. Yesterday, the Saudi ambassador to the UK literally expressed that we are looking toward continued effort to normalization with Israel, while saying that we look forward to have to improve the conditions for Palestinians. So did not say about sovereignty, independence, freedom, genocide. Rather, we are still committed to the normalization. So that's where we are as it relates to the Muslim world. Jordan also, we had evidence that Jordanian agricultural companies were supplying Israel with agricultural products, tomatoes, and so on, at a time where Palestinians in Gaza are not having a drop of water, let alone enough food to eat. So you're seeing the contradiction. This is an Israeli American Western war with the support, if not the consent, of the Arab world and the Muslim world. So it's a calamity that is unfolding, and I would say we should not be absent to compare it both to the Crusades era, because of the Crusades era, as well as the Muslim experience in Spain, this what you call lack of support and lack of commitment, and sometimes actually almost acting to further the oppression of those who were subject to the oppression at the time.
Sure. So speaking of the document that South Africa is putting forth, what could the outcome be? Is there any teeth behind it?
Well, the International Court of Justice, or the World Court as it's known, is the highest legal body in the United Nations. And usually cases of states are applied to the World Court to actually examine it. This is different than International Criminal Court, which actually looks at war crimes. In particular, these are state cases that are applied relative to the Four Geneva Convention, the Convention on Genocide, the Convention on the Indigenous People. The court is made up of 15 members. These are appointed by states. So the judges are not, in essence, they don't arrive into the court through independent mechanism, rather through state appointments. If 8 out of 15 judges arrive at a determination that what Israel is doing to the Palestinians in Gaza is a genocide, then the court will issue this based on the majority of the judges, 8 out of 15, as a determination. Now, just to caution people, the court is susceptible in terms of, because the judges are appointed by nations, the court is susceptible to the pressure upon the states that appoint these judges. And I would say that Israel and the United States, as well as a number of European countries, are mounting and will be mounting tremendous pressure on the states that have judges, a panel of judges, in order to actually dissuade some of these judges from reaching a determination on genocide. And there are a number of countries that receive foreign aid from the United States, from Germany, from Western Europe, that the foreign aid will be used as a point of pressure, as well as some economic, political benefits in there. So we should not think that these are judges that are only going to vote or cast their determination on merit alone. I think we have to be aware of the political pressure that is going to be mounted on the court.
Sure. Going back several years, we often hear the Palestinians were given an opportunity to accept a two-state solution, and they refused. But it wasn't quite a very good offer. Can you share with us what exactly was proposed and why there was opposition on the Palestinian side to that proposal?
Well, I think this is what you call a piece of Zionist propaganda in order to obfuscate the deliberate process of denying the Palestinian basic freedom and also sovereignty. Oslo Agreement that was signed in 1993 was a lopsided agreement. On the one hand, the Palestinians were asked to recognize Israel as a sovereign state, while Israel only recognized the PLO as the legitimate representative of the Palestinians to engage with in negotiations. While all of the key issues, in particular settlements, sovereignty, borders, water, religious sites, refugees, all these issues were unaddressed and unspoken of in relations to the agreement. I would say that Oslo Agreement came to an end in 1995. while people wait and talk about the different episodes, when the Israeli right wing from the Kahanist movement assassinated Rabin, that brought an end to the peace process from the Israeli side.
Mm-hmm.
And for people to remember that Netanyahu was agitating at the time against Rabin. And during the election campaign, the posters in the Israeli cities and towns had Rabin dressed in the Palestinian scarf, like Yasser Arafat, and he was called a traitor. Netanyahu created the atmosphere in partnership with the Kahanists at the time that ended up assassinating Rabin, followed by the attack on the Ibrahimi Mosque on Ramadan by Baruch Goldstein, killing 29 Muslim worshippers, Palestinians, in the Haram al-Ibrahimi, the Prophet Abraham Mosque, on the Fajr prayer during Ramadan, and injuring over 100 Palestinians at the time. The interesting part is that event shifted the political landscape in Israel, where this so-called two-state solution was dead. It's just a matter between 1995-96 up to the current period. It's just a matter of agreement on the procession for the funeral and what type of a grave should Oslo be dug in. So Netanyahu and Likud at the time, Sharon and others, expanded settlement activities. And the state that was offered for so-called the Palestinians that Arafat did not accept because it was not an acceptable agreement. It left the Jordan Valley in the hands of Israel. It only gave the Palestinians a small spots in the West Bank, not contiguous territory, and also undermined Muslim sovereignty over Al-Aqsa area. And at the time, Clinton wanted to divide sovereignty from what's above the ground versus what's under the ground. And in essence, the question, if the above the ground collapses, who actually has the right to the land? Because underneath Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Zionists have and the extremists have dug almost 5 stories below Al-Aqsa Mosque. So this is, again, even in the negotiations, it did not stop. The Palestinians continued to negotiate after the Camp David meeting with Clinton at the time, and continued at Taba. But both Clinton and also Ehud Barak wanted to lay the blame on Arafat for election purposes. So in essence, we got into election purposes that continued to be used as a framing, is that we offered the moon to the Palestinians and refused it. In reality, they offered the Palestinian an expanded prison with possibly painting the prison bars gold to feel that you actually have a golden cage that was offered to the Palestinians. And that's essentially what continues to be the reality. The last part of this, that when Oslo was signed, there was 130,000 settlers. Now we have 750,000 settlers in the West Bank. So immediately after the assassination of Rabin, and the settlement activity just continued to expand and expand, and the United States looked the other way. So now the United States only refers to settlements as impediment to peace, rather than being an illegal country contravening international law and the 4 Geneva Conventions. So even the United States began to accept the boundaries that have been set by the Israeli right wing, by Netanyahu, and the successive governments that were on the ground.
If I recall, the Israeli terrorist Baruch Goldstein was actually lauded and celebrated very greatly in Israel.
His grave is still a visitation site. The current Minister of Security, Ben Gvir, had his photograph, has Baruch Goldstein photograph in his office, and he actually belongs to the Kahanist movement. So not only that you have an assassination of Rabin by the Kahanists and Baruch Goldstein, but now he's a hero, and his grave site is a visitation site. And those who were, in essence, at the margin of Israeli politics in that time, are right now running the government in partnership with Netanyahu.
Amazing. There's been a lot of talk about the phrase, from the sea,
From the river to the
river
sea.
to the sea, and I think there's a lot of misinformation about it. Perhaps you could explain what is the intent of that phrase.
Well, again, the Zionist, what you call hasbara and propaganda, every statement that comes out from Palestinian is labeled or framed as one being anti-Semitic, and the second framing it as an annihilation of the Jewish people. So it's often this attempt to cast the Palestinians in the same way as some of the most pernicious history and periods of anti-Semitism. The reality is the following, is that Palestinians who live from the Mediterranean to the Jordan River have no rights to speak of. In 1948, they are citizens, but not sovereign, because sovereignty in Israel is only allocated or defined to be exclusively to the Jewish members of the state. So you have citizens of Israel that are unequal. Even to say there are fourth class citizens will be a stretch. So that's again is a foundation in terms of 48, and there's about 70 different laws that discriminate against Palestinians who are citizens of Israel. So that's 48. Palestinians in the West Bank are non-citizens, and they're subject to military governance. So they are an occupied people that are denied the right to be indigenous in their own land, and they're subject to military regulation. So there's no freedom, there's no equality. They are an occupied people. People in Gaza are internationally dependent people. They don't even have any status relative to they're not, quote, under the same type of military occupation in the West Bank. They're internationally dependent people. They don't have Egyptian citizenship. They don't have any citizenship whatsoever. The Palestinians in the Galilee, which is the Golan Heights, have been annexed to Israel, but also are denied the right to their own land and territories. And then we speak about refugees, both inside in Gaza, the West Bank, and outside Palestine, in Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and other places. These are stateless people. So when you say Palestine will be free from the river to the sea, is an assertion that the Palestinians are denied their freedom. That those who say this as a way that you're calling for the annihilation of the Jewish people, because that's the claim, the question need to be asked is, where do you stand on Palestinian freedom? Where do you stand on the right of the Palestinians in their own homes? Where do you stand on the Palestinians' right to return to their homes, to their lands, to their property? Where do you stand where Palestinians are stateless in their own state or in their own land? This is what we call is a diversionary attempt, since Israel cannot argue its point on merits of its continued settler colonialism. So it obfuscates the issues by every element of Palestinian discourses. So you can't, the Kufi is a symbol of terrorism. Saying Palestine is denying the existence of Israel. From the river to the sea is basically calling for the annihilation of the Jewish people. Saying Intifada is a call for terrorism. And the question is that what element of Palestinian political rights and identity would you actually speak of that is completely would not be denied or demonized or ostracized in general? The question to Israel and the Israeli supporters is, what is the borders of Israel that you speak of? What are the political rights of Palestinians? If you want to have them, they're your own population. Again, you have the responsibility for close to 7 million Palestinians between the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and 48 and the Golan Heights. What's their status? Again, you speak that you are a liberal democracy. Don't listen to yourself too much when you look in the mirror. If you say you're a liberal democracy, right, you have 7 million people. On the one hand, 2.5 to 3 million that are fourth-class citizens. You have the West Bank, completely military occupation. The Gaza Strip are stateless people. So please, as a liberal Democrat, you speak in the mirror and you think how beautiful you are, answer the question, what are the status of these 7 million? Should we all just get into buses and go to Jordan? Is that what you like? Okay, get me the buses. There's already 5 million or 4 million Palestinians in Jordan that are completely upset because they see their homes in Palestine. So you want to add another 7 million to them? Smart, very strategically smart, bright people. Right? So there's a whole host of almost a lack of consideration of what is it that we are dealing with when we're speaking about Palestine, and using this shifting of the discourse is not to answer the fundamental questions of what is the status and what are the position relative to Palestinians and right of return, Palestinian sovereignty, Palestinian right to their lands, homes, and so on. And that's where no one wants to engage. So you get the shifting, what you call divergere tactics that we are seeing.
Yeah. The late Bishop Desmond Tutu, Nelson Mandela, even Jimmy Carter has called what is going on in Philistine as apartheid, and it's pretty clear to
Desmond Tutu say it's worse than apartheid. It's worse than what apartheid in South Africa.
The world was very quick to acknowledge the state of apartheid in South Africa. Why is it that they're so reluctant to do so in this case?
Well, I don't think that the world was very quick in recognizing. Again, apartheid was in place since 47, 48 in South Africa, built upon a settler colonial project between the British, the Dutch, and so on. And then you have this anti-apartheid movement developed. Nelson Mandela was sent to jail in 1964 and was released from jail in 1991-92. So the world was actually dragging its feet, including the United States. The United States actually continued till the last minute, where Nelson Mandela is about to come to the United States, that Nelson Mandela was still entered in the US as a terrorist. And they had to change his classification for his visit. The United States continued to defend South Africa. Israel used to bypass the arms embargo and support South Africa militarily. Right? So South Africa struggled considerably, and I do think that we're facing a moment right now where the world is beginning to take Israel to task. I do think that the majority of the world population is decisively on the Palestine side. I think even if we think about countries, the United Nations General Assembly vote on Palestinian self-determination was 156 countries. Only 10 that were in opposition, and only 3 of them you could say they're large countries. So the world community, the world consensus is decisively on the Palestine side. Without the continued support of the United States, Britain, Germany, France, and you could say Canada and Australia, these are the countries that are lock, step, and barrel with supporting Israel for their own domestic purposes and their own strategic positioning. The world community, both in terms of its political structure as well as populations, is overwhelmingly Palestinians. We could see this from the data on social media. Right? During I think a period of almost a month period, pro-Israel posts on social media were about 440 million posts, measured. Pro-Palestine is about 25 billion. So literally 50 to 1. And this is with the censorship. Can you imagine without the censorship, without the shadow banning, without pulling all these posts from Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and so on, what would have been the impact? So they understand this. They know that they cannot defend their position with a straight face. And that's why they have to engage in all these divergere tactics to spin away from the key arguments. Also to spin away from trying to project Netanyahu. Netanyahu as a salesman, quote, for Israel case is horrible as a salesperson, and completely untrustworthy to put them to argue and speak in front of both even the U.S. audience or the world community. So I think the world is shifted very dramatically, and I think what we need here, the United States is lagging in similar way in South Africa. The United States was very late to actually come on to supporting or taking strong positions on apartheid South Africa. And the political elite were the last to join the train. The train was already almost stopping at Johannesburg before the politicians in the US were trying to catch the train while being in New York or Washington, D.C.
Sure. In the midst of this horrific massacre, we see countries like Ireland and South Africa, as you mentioned, and several others that are really displaying amazing courage and fortitude. Even here in the West, we see every weekend demonstrations, etc. People are reaching out to their politicians, trying to educate their neighbors, etc. What amongst all this gives you hope? I know that people are saying yes, but nothing is coming of it. However, many of us believe it's a momentum build. So perhaps share with us something optimistic about what you're seeing throughout the world.
Well, change is accumulative, it's not instantaneous, meaning that the political work and activism and organizing is over a long period. You're talking about a 30 plus year of organizing for Palestine. So the fact that we have a mass showing at this time is a result of this long 30-year momentum building, education, outreach, relationship building, and so on, that it sees its results. Whether Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims who joined the anti-apartheid movement, solidarity with Latin American countries that were facing U.S. intervention, the mobilization for jobs and healthcare in the U.S., mobilization to end poverty, the anti-Iraq war mobilization, the momentum around the protest in Ferguson and the murder of George Floyd. All these are moments where it actually brought Palestine into the discussion, to the conversation, and knowing what type of landscape. So there's a lot of hope and a lot of what you call optimism, even in the middle of the darkness that we see. Seeing that countries that are closing Israeli embassies and expelling the Israeli ambassadors from their country, Colombia, Bolivia, speaking about South Africa, speaking even in terms of Spain, the justice minister in Spain, she's very, very forthright and continued to call for investigations and examinations. Some of the political leadership in Italy, some in Norway. So there's tremendous mobilizations that are taking place. I would say that the reason that these mobilizations are weakened, I would say the Arab and Muslim position in the Arab and Muslim world is the weak link in the political mobilization. And if there is a transformation in that part, I would say we would see a different world emerging relative to Palestine. So it's not coincidental that the weakness of the Arab Muslim body politic globally is actually making the mass transformation that is taking place in front of our eyes being in a weaker position in its demands. Sure. To have 1 million people show up in London on October 4th is unprecedented for Palestine at that particular time. To see 350,000 appear in Washington, D.C., right? To see the thousands that are taking place, to see almost 2 million in Bangladesh, in Malaysia, to see the mobilization in Turkey, right? Those mobilizations are not being matched by political leadership in the Arab and Muslim world that would signal to Bolivia, to Colombia, to Venezuela, to South Africa, to Mali, and so on, that we could actually reimagine the different world. And I think that's where some of our effort has to be focused in order to bring the optimism. I'm very, very optimistic that we're experiencing an epistemic transformation at a global level relative to Palestine. It's just a matter of how to make it concrete and to translate into facts and developments on the ground. And I think that's where that link that is missing as a result of the weakness in the Arab and Muslim position, statewide, from the state level, not from the population.
Sure. Finally, what advice do you have for people listening? What should we continue doing? What maybe isn't the best use of our time and energy? How do you think we can be most effective?
One, continue to organize, continue to mobilize, continue to advocate. I think the work that has been done by ICNA, the work that has been done by NCIC, the work that's been done by KEA, the work been done by AMP, the work that has been done in coalition with JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace, the work that has been in terms of the khutbahs, the speeches that has been done in SPIA, MCA, and other places. These are very important. So I would say continue to educate, continue to do your activism. Second, I am encouraging people to actually pursue political office. If the political leadership at your local level is not responsive to you, then it's time for you to throw your hat in the ring, or to see somebody that is supportive, that you actually begin to support them. So I'm really happy to see a number of individuals from our community. Dean Omar is running, for a state legislature. A number of people are running for a congressional seats. A large number of individuals are running for Democratic Central Committee, whether it's Santa Clara, Alameda, Contra Costa. Those are very positive, and I think people need to jump more, run for all these different positions, the Board of Education. So I want people to continue to do this, because you have to be involved and to be in decision-making positions in order to actually make your opinion on issues that matter to your community, but also issues that matter to other communities. So I'm I'm encouraging people to do so. I say also encourage people to engage in utilizing social media as a platform. It has been a very important site for changing the narrative. And I don't think we should allow anyone to capture that social media platform, whether it's meta censorship or any of these. We should not allow them to try to capture the space by pushing us out. Sure. Which means that we need to, our skilled people in the social media space and the creativity that they have, to be sharpened in order for us to maintain what I consider to be a strong leverage in that area, and utilize it into a greater level of influence and impact in there. At the organizational level, I do think we have to invest some resources into training, into programs for our young people in order for them to engage. I'm very cognizant of individual, and I recommend for people, often people try to compare and to try to use language that would be to the detriment of the Palestine cause. I don't think that individuals should try to constantly make the comparisons between Nazi Germany and Israel. That's not a comparison for us to do. If there's a Jewish debate on that, that's a Jewish debate. It's not our debate. There's a lot of material in human rights reports, a lot of material with Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Beit Salim, Al-Haq, and so on. But people, out of what you call anger, they begin to resort to areas of debate that is completely wrong, and is not helpful. So I would counsel people to actually focus on the strategies that are far more effective, and also to make sure that you don't fall into the traps of bots, into the social media entrapments that wants you to actually engage in this negative discourse. Because of the success, the only way for them to win the space is by diverting your attention to these places. So some of the posts that we see in social media are destructive. Not everything that you see in social media you should actually amplify. So you have to look with a strategic eye as you're engaging in Palestine. So these are some of the recommendations relative to people engagement at this point.
Sounds good. For our last few minutes, Dr. Hatem, you're the founder of the Islamophobia Studies Center, and of course, Islamophobia extends beyond just what's happening in Gaza. Tell us a little bit about what this organization is focused on, what some of the learnings are, as well as an upcoming program that you have.
Well, Islamophobia, just as a basic definition, is a type of racism that target expression of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. Now, the title of this, we have a fundraiser coming up in MCA on Saturday. It's really looking at Palestine and the Islamophobia industry. It's not coincidental that immediately as soon as October 7th occurred, you found the avalanche of Islamophobia at a level almost more than the level of 9/11. So much so that resulted in the stabbing of Wadi al-Fayoumi in Illinois, the shooting of the 3 Palestinian students, the shooting on some activists in St. Louis, some attacks on mosques. And there is direct, what you call, linkages between pro-Israel support and the Islamophobia industry. In some of our research, we estimate 70% of all the funding to the Islamophobia industry comes from pro-Israel sources. And if you think about the prominent, dominant Islamophobic organizations, you will find that they are directly either funded or led by pro-Israel personality or funded through pro-Israel sources. So much so that the San Francisco Jewish Federation funded the Tea Party Patriots, funded Gert Wilder, the Islamophobe in the Netherlands who promoted the Prophet ﷺ cartoons, supported and funded the Canary Mission that is targeting Muslim activists, MSA's leaders in different places, extended support and funded almost every type of Islamophobic personality. They also promoted and funding with AJC, Daniel Pipes, promoting Daniel Pipes' work and Emerson's work, giving the Leadership and Courage Award to Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who actually recommended to Muslims to convert to Christianity. So that those linkages are there, and I do think in our Saturday conversation will highlight why was it central for Israel to actually engage in this Islamophobic discourse. And then secondly, the relationship to the Hindutva, increasingly the alliance between pro-Israel forces in the United States and the PGP party activists, the RSS, the American Hindu Foundation in their work that actually uses Islamophobia. And we did a full report on the Islamophobia industry in India, stoking bigotry. And as such, to focus on, we just recently also did a whole report on Islamophobia industry in Canada, and to see these relationship of funding, of resources, and how to actually respond to it as such. So that's where our work is really some focus on the positive work of in promoting the Muslim community. I wanted to focus attention on how the structure of demonization of the Muslims taken place and how to actually develop skills, programs, and projects in order to counter it with data, with resources, with training programs. And we're hoping right now we're in the process of building a certificate program training to focus on HR, human resource departments within companies, where we will actually get them to come to a program that will be jointly done at Berkeley. And as HR increasingly are looking at Islamophobia, to go beyond what we call symbolic inclusion. Many people Muslims who work in companies are so good at putting pictures of a woman in hijab, and basically they say now we have diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we're dealing with Islamophobia because we put a Muslim hijab woman in the cafeteria picture circle, and possibly we hired a Muslim immigrant to work in the cafeteria. That is what you call symbolic inclusion, that is not actually dealing with the nuts and bolts of Islamophobia, and how for companies to begin to aware with many Muslims facing Islamophobia within their company, within their work environment. So we're designing this certificate program to deal with HR training for the managers, so they will actually be certified to say that I did get a certificate from UC Berkeley, being trained in HR issues related to Islamophobia. So that's something that we are undertaking.
Wonderful. It's a subject that I think we should all be well aware of and educated on. So we have an opportunity this Saturday at 5 o'clock at MCA in Santa Clara to support this organization and learn more about what Islamophobia is and how we can help counteract it. Look forward to seeing you all there. Finally, I want to thank Bay Muslim Media for putting tonight's Fireside Chat together, along with its partners, SBA, WVMA, CARE San Francisco Bay Area, ICNA, the Council of Social Justice, and the Northern California Islamic Council. And finally, a great deal of appreciation to Dr. Hatem Bazian for joining us this evening. Keep up the great work, Dr. Hatem, and we look forward to hearing about the great work that the Islamophobia Studies Center is doing this coming Saturday. Look forward to seeing you all there. I hope you all enjoyed and found value in tonight's session. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.